Welcome to Literary and Jury Charge Practice. Let's start out with this section of the article we've been working on about retirement, stepping into retirement. This section is called Training Up the Next Generation. Ready? Here we go. Working for the same employer for 4+ decades, not many people today can say that or want to, but that is exactly my experience. In contrast, during the last 9 years, my daughter has held 2 jobs, my son has held 3. I think young people today expect exactly that, a varied work-life experience. In fact, I have heard it said that your resume looks stale or you look unaccomplished if you do not possess a variety of experience. As an official court reporter, I have seen my job change in methodology, but the reasons why I exist in the courtroom have not changed. Although manual writers, paper carbon sets, and typewriters have given way to digitized, sleek writers, computers with real-time text and video testimony, the protection of the official record remains my job. I am the impartial person in the courtroom and the person ultimately responsible to produce the record that may be sent to higher courts to decide further disputes. But that is not the reason for my story. I am transitioning into some form of retirement from official work, and I must say that is a little unnerving to change my routine after so many years, but that unsettled feeling is somewhat helped by my current activity. I am pleased to be assisting a young freelance reporter transition into the official workplace. In other words, I am training my replacement. Many years ago, a young NCRA government relations specialist told me the best thing a leader can do is train his or her replacement. I listened well, Dave Weinhold. I would like to highlight for you a few areas I have observed during the transition. 1. Production in this day and age. Some reporters have never even put a cover on a transcript. As we trend toward e-commerce, finishing a transcript, title pages, index pages, exhibits, printing, binding could all be done by an agency office. In this office, that all falls upon the individual reporter. Those steps must be learned. 2. Office procedures, learning the types of proceedings that are automatically transcribed, where the original official transcript is filed, who receives copies, and importantly, interpreting and abiding by state Supreme Court rules as well as local rules governing official reporters. 3. Partnering in the judicial process, dedicated to the concept of another set of eyes and ears for the jurist in charge, but remaining completely impartial in all proceedings and above reproach when it comes to keeping matters in strict confidence and using discretion in discussions inside and outside of the courtroom. 4. Endurance. While many freelancers work all day at positions, the possibility of all-day writing day after day is essential in a busy court that requires the buildup of endurance and stamina to maintain health and writing well in the courtroom. 5. The need for speed. This necessity is last but certainly not least among the concerns. Officials must be ready to get down, not only rapid-fire cross-examination, but also exchanges in the courtroom during objections, the counter-arguments, and in the court ruling, not to mention the occasional witness who may want to chime in. We also have Child Protective Service proceedings where it is not unusual to have 10 or more people reporting to the court on cases. Speaker identification is important, along with a reserve of speed. Working in a small environment, I find that co-workers as well as all court staff are helpful and interested in contributing to the successful transition of my replacement and the start of her meaningful career. As my contemporaries and I are entering another phase in life, it truly is up to us to mentor the next generation of workers in our distinguished profession. It is a rewarding feeling that I recommend to my peers. Join me in experiencing the joy of passing the mantle to others. All right, that is the last of that article, Stepping into Retirement. All All right, let's try some jury charge practice now. Ready? Here we go. Count 2 of the indictment charges the defendant with knowingly acting in the United States as an agent of a foreign government without prior notification to the Attorney General. In order to establish a violation of Count 2, the government must prove the following propositions. First, that the defendant acted in the United States as an agent of a foreign government, in this case, the Republic of Zimbabwe. Second, that the defendant failed to notify the Attorney General of the United States that he would be acting in the United States as an agent of the Republic of Zimbabwe prior to so acting. And third, that the defendant acted knowingly. Fourth, that the defendant acted at least in part as an agent for the Republic of Zimbabwe in the Northern District of Illinois, which includes Chicago, during the time period alleged in the indictment. If you find from your consideration of all the evidence that each of these propositions has been proved beyond a reasonable doubt, then you should find the defendant guilty. If, on the other hand, you find from your consideration of all the evidence that any one of these propositions has not been proved beyond a reasonable doubt, then you should find the defendant not guilty. The term agent of a foreign government means an individual who agrees to act within the United States subject to the direction or control of a foreign government or official. A person acts knowingly if he realizes what he is doing and is aware of the nature of his conduct, and does not act through ignorance, mistake, or accident. In deciding whether the defendant acted knowingly, you may consider all of the evidence, including what the defendant did or said. The government does not need to prove that the defendant knew of the requirement to notify the Attorney General. Count 2 of the indictment charges the defendant with being an agent of a foreign government during the time period alleged in the indictment. In order to convict the defendant of that offense, you do not need to find that the defendant was an agent during the entire time period specified in the indictment. If all jurors agree that it has been shown beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant was an agent of the Republic of Zimbabwe at any time within that period, and the government has proven beyond a reasonable doubt all other elements of the offense as set forth in these instructions, then you must find the defendant guilty of Count 2 of the indictment. Count 3 of the indictment charges the defendant with willfully conspiring to provide services on behalf of and for the benefit of certain specially designated nationals, specifically Robert Mugabe, Gideon Gono, Simon Kea Moho, and Samuel Simbar Mubin, without first having obtained a license from the United States Department of the Treasury. U.S. persons, wherever located, are prohibited from providing services on behalf of or for the benefit of specially designated national without first having obtained a license from the Department of the Treasury. Services include legal, accounting, financial, brokering, freight forwarding, transportation, public relations, or other services. To find the defendant guilty of the crime charged in Count 3, you must find that the government has proven each of the following elements beyond a reasonable doubt. 1. That 2 or more U.S. persons agreed to provide services on behalf of or for the benefit of a specially designated national. 2. That the defendant knowingly and willfully became a member of the conspiracy with the intent to further its unlawful purpose. 3. That one or more of the conspirators knowingly committed at least one overt act for the purpose of furthering the conspiracy charged in Count 3 after August 27, 2008, and 4, that the charged conspiracy existed on or after the date any of the above-named persons were designated as specially designated nationals, and that the defendant was a member of the conspiracy on or after that date. 5. None of the co-conspirators obtained a license from the Department of the Treasury to provide services on behalf of or for the benefit of the specially designated nationals mentioned above. The term United States person or U.S. person means any United States citizen, permanent resident alien, or any person in the United States. As we used in Count 3, the defendant acted willfully if he acted intentionally and purposely with the intent to do something the law forbids, that is, with bad purpose to disobey or to disregard the law. The defendant need not be aware of the specific law or rule that his conduct would violate. In other words, the defendant does not have to know that his conduct would violate a particular law, executive order, or federal regulation, but he must act with the intent to do something the law forbids. Once you are all in the jury room, the first thing you should do is choose a foreperson. The foreperson should see to it that your discussions are carried on in an organized way and that everyone has a fair chance to be heard. You may discuss the case only when all jurors are present. If you need to communicate with me while you are deliberating, send a note through the court security officer. The note should be signed by the foreperson or by one or more members of the jury. To have a complete record of this trial, it is important that you do not communicate with me except by a written note. I may have to talk to the lawyers about your message, so it may take me some time to get back to you. You may continue your deliberations while you wait for my answer. Please be advised that transcripts of trial testimony are not available to you. You must rely on your collective memory of the testimony. If you send me a message, do not include the breakdown of any votes you may have conducted. A verdict form has been prepared for you. You will take this form with you to the jury room. Read the verdict form. When you have reached unanimous agreement, your foreperson will fill in, date, and sign the verdict form. Each of you will sign it. Advise the court security officer once you have reached a verdict. When you come back to the courtroom, I will read the verdict aloud. The verdict must represent the considered judgment of each juror. Your verdict, whether it is guilty or not guilty, must be unanimous. You should make every reasonable effort to reach a verdict. In doing so, you should consult with each other, express your own views, and listen to your fellow jurors' opinions. Discuss your differences with an open mind. Do not hesitate to re-examine your own view and change your opinion if you come to believe it is wrong, but you should not surrender your honest beliefs about the weight or effect of evidence just because of the opinions of your fellow jurors, or just so that there can be a unanimous verdict. The 12 of you should give fair and equal consideration to all the evidence. You should deliberate with the goal of reaching an agreement that is consistent with the individual judgment of each juror. You are impartial judges of the facts. Your sole interest is to determine whether the government has proved its case beyond a reasonable doubt. See what we have left, of this closing argument. Excuse me again. All right, ready? Again, this is a closing argument. Here we go. But where was Zokhar's dad when he's taking pictures with Tam? Where are the pictures of Zokhar? He was the invisible kid, but you know Zokhar tried. He still tried hard. Eric Traub, remember him? He lives in Washington, D.C. now. He taught Zokhar in the 9th and the 12th grade, and he remembers him very, very well and wrote a letter of recommendation in December 2010. And I asked him to look at it, and he read it out loud to you, and I said to him, did you believe it then? Yes. Do you believe it now? Yes. Zokhar is a good student. He quickly absorbs new ideas. He's amiable with peers and adults. His good nature and positive spirit have made Zokhar a pleasure to know over the last 4 years. He's polite and respectful and enters class with a warm greeting. This was a man that fondly remembers Zokhar and remembers stepping into a photo. I think he called it a photo bomb. He stepped into the photo with Zokhar and another student. Zokhar did the Model UN Club. He did Best Buddies. He was good with disabled kids. He seemed to do high school on his own, though. Even his wrestling coach, Roy Howard, remember the man who came in and he was a volunteer wrestling coach, and because he had another job, and he came in and he said, yeah, I always like to talk to the parents about the nutrition and all of the demands of wrestling. Wrestling has some of the most demanding, practices to it, and, because the weight has to be managed and all of that. and I like to talk to the parents about the demands on the kids, and I like to talk to them about nutrition. Did he ever meet Zokar's parents? No, they didn't show up for senior day, the big day for the wrestlers, when the wrestlers get their rose. We know now that something was going on at home. Zokar's dad was becoming more disabled. His mother and older brother began to listen to an Armenian man named Misha, who brought his own special version of Islam into the home and began to teach them about it. We know that Tam began to have ideas and obsessions about conspiracy theories and about religious extremism. We know that by 2010, Zubaydah, Zokar's mom, had changed in many ways. Zubaydah, who had been a flashy dresser, described by many people that way, and who enjoyed a good party, and whose parenting skills were probably learned in the chaotic shuttling that she went through as a young child in the villages of Dagestan. We know that she had changed in conservative dress and conservative religious views and was not a safe harbor for Zokar. You heard from Zubaydah's own family, her sisters and her nieces, what a shock it was, how scary it was to them to see her covered in dark. What did they say to you? That is not how our family was raised. And you know from the government's own intelligence committee report that Zubaydah was turning radical. 2 years before the Boston Marathon bombings, Tam and Zubaydah came to the attention of the FBI based on information received from the Russian Federal Security Service. In March 2011, the FBI received information from the FSB alleging that Tam and Zubaydah were adherents of radical Islam and that Tam was preparing to travel to Russia to join unspecified underground groups in Dagestan and Chechnya. So that's what was happening to Zokar's mom and Zokar's older brother, and what was going on with his dad. Anzur was becoming more and more disabled, and you heard from Dr. Nis that when Anzur came to the United States, he came with a series of mental health problems. He began getting treatment when Dr. Nis was here in 2003, 2004, and 2005, and they only increased in intensity over time, and then he suffered that remarkably damaging head injury. You heard about the medical records, and he read some of the records to you. They're in evidence. You can see the entirety of the records. In 2007, patient complains of attacks with flashbacks and out-of-body visions, of having some auditory hallucinations and his name being called, difficulty falling and staying asleep, and will go on for days without being asleep. Patient reports having auditory hallucinations. Later in 2009, voices screaming his name or whispering, and some visual hallucinations, little lizard-like creatures for the past 3 to 4 weeks. Anzur reports severe frontal and left side headaches with decreased sensation on left side of face. Patient reports unsteady gait, visual changes, tremor, auditory hallucinations, multiple voices screaming his name. This was Zokar's dad. 2011, Anzur reports feeling quite overwhelmed, appears depressed, tearful, having difficulty functioning, upset with minor things. If I'm not getting better, my wife would divorce me. 2014, shortly before he leaves the United States and returns to Russia for good, to whom it may concern, patient suffering from mental illness, not able to work, needs constant supervision and support. Sam Lipson came before you. He knows the family for a long time. His mom was the landlady. Sam Lipson came and told you about the changes in Anzur and changes in his friend. He viewed Anzur as his friend. He saw him losing weight. He saw him feeling burdened and unhappy. We know there were serious problems in the home, but Zokar still had friends. They didn't know much about his family. They hadn't been to his house, but they cared for him. You could see that when they came before you. He was loyal. He was laid back. He was funny. He was quiet. He was shy. Rosa Booth, a young woman, came in and described him as sweet, shy, and goofy, and she had a crush on him, but she was so shy she wouldn't accept his invitation to go to the prom. Bet Zampar knew him in Best Buddies. He made her laugh and feel good. He was respectful to the other girls. He treated them with respect. And when Bet saw the pictures of the Boston Marathon bombers, one looked like Zokar, but she very quickly set that thought aside. Zokar had a bond with his wrestling buddies, Remember, Henry Alvarez came in. He was kind of funny about comparing the various sports. He said that Zocar was kind and funny and would dance to a song to break the tension in a room. He asked Zocar to come to his senior night and to be there when he got his rose. He couldn't imagine that Zocar could do something like he did. Coach Howard, who chose Zocar to be co-captain of the wrestling team, described him as a quiet, hard worker and dedicated. He was a good wrestler. One thing that was consistent in all of the family chaos and craziness was Zocar remained the invisible child. His parents weren't there for his wrestling match. His parents never met his teachers in high school. In the fall of 2011, Zocar went off to UMass Dartmouth. On the surface, his college years started out sort of ordinary. He did okay in school. He had friends. He drank, although he was too young. He smoked and sold some pot. He was with his friends the first year. Remember Tia Dorton describing the bro nights that they had, and she recalled that very fondly. She even recalled very fondly the selfie when they clearly are having been done something that they shouldn't have been doing, but she remembered it and she teared up over the memory of her good friend Zocar. And we will stop there. That will conclude our literary and jury charge practice.